Welcome to Women, Men, and Relationships. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's show. Today's show is very special to me. It is an interview with the Harville Hendrix, who was the creator of Imago Therapy over 30 years ago. I was supposed to interview Harville and Helen on this episode, and in fact, I've got a video version of it, which is not up yet, but will be on YouTube in the next, I'd say, 30 to 60 days. So you guys are getting the absolute best preview because I'm able to edit. So you get to see a little bit, hear a little bit less. There were a few pauses and things in between, but I start the recording right away, and I don't even do like a proper intro because I caught a conversation between Harville and I about his shirt, which I wanted to share with you because I thought it was really amazing to point out the mindset piece and the fact that, back when he was 30, he was in therapy, and what his therapist said back then that still really relates to what we go through now. I named today's show Your Relationship Explained, and I invite you, even though it's a longer show than I'm usually producing, I invite you to listen to it more than one time. When I interviewed him, besides being super excited to interview him and being on video and not just audio and being able to see him and show him all the books I have and to, watch his expression and to have us, be eye to eye, I also was in a different place than I am today in terms of what I wanted out of that interview and my own personal interests that I wanted to have advice on, if you will. And now I'm in a little bit different place. And so today, when I was editing, I actually heard it a little differently. It still reinforced what I already know, but I self-reflected a little bit deeper today than I was then. And so I'm going to invite you, because as you know, some of you listen to my show over and over again, and I appreciate you for it, and I appreciate those of you that tell me about it. As a podcaster, especially for people who are putting out shows that aren't necessarily educational or inspirational, they're just sort of entertaining. I don't know that those people go back and listen to their own shows, but when I'm giving information or I'm interviewing someone like Harville and I'm making notes, if it's like a top 5 something or other, or 7 tips to this, that, and whatever, when I'm listening to it, when I'm editing, I'm taking notes again. And I'll often get done with the show and think, that's a really good show. Or think, wow, I need to listen to that again. So I am a listener of my own show sometimes, not for me, although sometimes for me. Sometimes I can go back and listen to a show I've recorded and think, wow, that was really smart of me. I was in a zone that day and I needed to hear that again. So I'm going to invite you to listen to the show more than once, even though it is long. And even though it's probably not going to happen all in one clip for those of you that are driving while listening to podcasts, but I just invite you to the end, because I messed up something at the end, which was perfectly timed. It got me to ask a question about my past relationship that I didn't even know I wanted an answer to, but I got to hear Harville's answer, and it was perfect. And I manifested the exact situation. In fact, while I look forward to meeting Helen and to interviewing her and to working with her at a workshop in the near future, I really wanted to interview Harville. I was open to both of them, and that was fine because they do everything together, but I manifested just him. I also manifested answers to questions that I had and heard it straight from the creator's mouth. And so it's a really powerful show, and I hope you enjoy it. And the last thing I'm going to say about this show is that we're going to do this work at the next big step. We're going to do the exercise that I keep referring to, and I know those of you who are listening to the shows are probably nauseated by hearing me say it over and over again, but I don't know how else to put it in your face, so to speak, that this work is profound, and it can answer a lot of questions and tie together many behaviors and patterns and issues that you have with friends and coworkers, as well as past relationships. And so if you can't make it to the live event, which is of course the best possible thing you could do, because you're getting the community. And as you heard in a show last week with Dr. Sandra Dalton, you heard about the 7 types of rest that make up sacred rest. And one of those is community. And I promise that if nothing else, you would come out of an event with like-minded people, my tribe, feeling a sense of sacred rest and purposefulness that you haven't felt before. So besides the coming to the live event, which is, again, the best thing you could do, that is why I created the virtual ticket. And while you can go and you can buy the workbook, which I really want you all to do, you can get Getting the Love You Want workbook that Harville has and do it yourself. Having that community support and that accountability that's being provided with the virtual ticket as well as a live event, you're going to get 3 months of accountability. So you get to actually be held accountable to doing the work. Because as you're going to hear Harville talk about in today's show, this is not about knowing, this is about doing. And it isn't about doing from an uninspired place or an uneducated place. This is about doing from a purposeful, mindful place. But you have to do something for there to be change. You can't just listen to it. You can't just know it. You can't just understand it. You have to live it in a different way. So I invite you to seriously consider, look at your life, look at your relationships. Really, like, it's $249. Seriously, the virtual ticket, that's not even 2 therapy sessions, okay? So jjflizanes.com/next big step. Go there now. jjflizanes.com/next big step. Let me tell you a little bit about Harville and Helen, since I'm not doing a formal intro because we just roll right into talking. Harville Hendricks, PhD, and Helen Lakely Hunt, PhD, are internationally respected couples therapists, educators, speakers, and New York Times best-selling authors. Together, they have written over 10 books with more than 4 million copies sold, including the timeless classic, Getting the Love You Want, A Guide for Couples. In addition, Harville has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey television program 17 times. However, marriage, even for marriage experts, is never easy. Just like any other couple, Harville and Helen experienced a power struggle when they attempted to change, coerce, and threaten each other to be more like me. A critical comment would degenerate into loud arguments. Blaming each other was a common focus of conversation. After a decade of marriage, they found themselves teetering on the brink of divorce. As Harville and Helen routinely trained other therapists how to save marriages, they started to lose hope that their own relationship would survive. Facing the inevitable, they decided to give one last try and commit to do everything possible to salvage their relationship. Ironically, their own teaching made the biggest difference. Harville and Helen experienced the ultimate benefit of practicing what you preach to overcome negativity and learn to lovingly communicate with each other. They reconnected through the exercises they used to coach thousands of other couples, restored their marriage, and enjoy a true partnership that has lasted over 30 years. Their story of hope and a seasoned history of helping others uniquely qualifies Harville and Helen as true relationship experts. Harville and Helen co-created Imago Relationship Therapy to promote the transformation of couples and families by creating a relationship culture that support universal equality. In addition, they've developed resources that help couples, families, and educators strengthen their relationship knowledge and skills. They are co-founders of Imago Relationships International, a nonprofit organization that has trained over 2,000 therapists and educators in 51 countries around the world. To find out more and to buy their books and look for workshops, go to harvilleandhelen.com. That's HARVILLE, Harville, and Helen.com.
A very loud shirt today. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. I love it. It's very Hawaiian.
It is. That's true. I wear Hawaiian shirts all summer in lieu of going to Hawaii so that I have the, they say if your mind creates it, then you're in it. I actually learned this many years ago. I went to Hawaii and I bought some shirts and I came back and I was in therapy at the time. Many years ago, because it was therapy in Dallas. And so I left Dallas in 1982. So you can imagine how long that is. And so I was talking to my therapist about my trip to Hawaii. And I got into, I'm so unhappy about being back. It was so beautiful there in Dallas. I lived in Dallas at the time. It was before I moved to New York, but actually before Helen and I married. And I said, I'm kind of depressed about this. And my life here is, it's just so hot, and Hawaii, it was so beautiful, even though it was hot. And I just went on and on and on about how bad it was to be back. And he interrupted me and he said, look, Harville, you can live in Hawaii every minute of your life. Just go put on your Hawaiian shirt, and why don't you put a palm tree up in your backyard? And I understand you have a pool, so you've got the ocean right there, and just complaining about not living in Hawaii, it's just got to stop. You're wasting your time messing with your heart, doing bad things to your immune system, and so forth. So I looked at him and said, my God, so you're telling me I'm a pathological victim? He says, yes. So I took him seriously and realized I don't have to be in Hawaii to have good thoughts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. That was a change in my life. One of my big therapy breakthroughs.
That was great. I love
charged
it.
me immensely.
I love it.
Thank
So,
you.
so thank you again for being here. I'm a huge fan of your work.
Thank you.
And the oldest book I have, Keeping the Love.
Oh,
Okay.
no,
Right. And then that original version of the Getting the Love You Want. And of course I
love.
have here the workbook, which
Oh my goodness.
I use. And also I
I'm
sent
impressed.
over, well, I did a whole show on imagotherapy with a local therapist who also uses your workbook within her therapy with couples. And it's really the only therapy that I tell people I think they should be doing when it comes to relationship work.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm an avid learner and explorer, and I test things out all the time. And so I'm very particular about what I believe in terms of, like you were talking about your Hawaiian shirt, using law of attraction, using your mind, using visualization, using what we're given to create what we want. At the same time, different kinds of therapies like EMDR, things like hypnosis, and definitely imagotherapy is my number one recommendation for anyone in relationship, even if they're not in relationship, because I'll tell you, I haven't finished the workbook. We didn't get through the whole thing, but when I did the Creating Your Imago, I'm a very interested, passionate learner. And when I can be blown away, and you've taught me something about myself that I didn't know before, that exercise, I thought, oh my God, why isn't everyone doing this exercise? Forget couples therapy. Why isn't every person everywhere doing the Create My Imago exercise? So when you get to the end and you're putting the A and the B and the C and the D together to see what it is you're trying to heal, that's priceless, because that's why you choose friends. That's why you get along with certain coworkers. It explains so much in that one exercise that I just thought, everyone needs to be doing this. I don't care. Single or couple.
I'm with you. I agree with that. By the way, Getting is, this is the 30th anniversary of Getting. And we have talked to the publisher now several months ago, and they are going to reissue it this year with that. And they said they'd reissue it if we would edit it and update it and bring it into our current thought. So it had an update in 2001, because Imago evolves all the time. It's like, I sometimes think I've got a period at the end of the sentence and we're done now. We just have to figure out how to distribute it. But the period then turns into another paragraph. So when every 10 or 12 years, when the book is come out again, like 10th year anniversary, 20th year, and now 30th, there's always something to do. But this one is a rather significant revision, because we've had some rather, I would say, radical insights. Not like radical that we, but reframing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that people have an imago is like universal, and there's not much you can do about that except, as you just did, see how it works with friends and how it works in business. And when we first did that, I didn't actually think that it would be applicable in business or with friends, because I was so myopically focused on trying to figure out this thing called couples and why they're so intensely attracted to each other. And then it's so wonderful, and then it goes so bad. Yeah. So that was a phenomenon that just got my interest. And I said, I got to figure this out. But we now have some larger frames within which to understand that primary psychological and unconscious dynamic. So anyway, the book will come out, I think, January 22nd. We couldn't get it out this year because we started the journey too late. Publishers work with a 9-month time frame, and they can't change that very much, even with the reissued book. So it'll come out again then, and just to let you know that if you got the old one, the new one is on its way. And
well, I know there's another one. I know that there's a red cover that's more updated than this one, right? The 25th anniversary or 20th anniversary?
We're still behind. That's 201, I think. No.
I know I'm still behind. Harville, how many, you're going to send me the next one, and we'll do another show and we'll help promote the next one.
All right, 2008, I think that's the one you've got there. And then 2018 is the 30th anniversary. That was the 20th.
Okay. Okay. So, well, I will be more than happy to help spread the word when that comes out, and maybe you can come back on, the both of you, and we can do another little promo for the book.
Now, do you go by JJ?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, JJ.
Yes.
Yeah. We have a daughter who just changed her name from Kimberly to KJ. her middle name is June. So she wants to be called, I said, how can I, after 30 years of calling you Kim, start calling you KJ? And she said, just do it. No empathy whatsoever on the challenge to an old mind that she just put me to.
Well, I have the list of talking points that you and I can talk about that was sent to me by your team. And I want to go through some of those, but I want to get a little bit deeper with some of the things, because the people that have been following my show and me have heard about imago therapy. Some of them may have done some of the exercises, some from the workbook. So I want to be able to skim the surface for the people that are listening right now or watching this right now that are new and have never heard of this before. I'm going to do a little intro before I publish all this, and I'm going to read your bios. It's on the back of one of these books. Okay. So I'll do a proper introduction. And yeah, let's start at the beginning about imago therapy and how and you can correct me, this is what I say about imago therapy, that my understanding from years ago when I first got introduced to your work was that the idea that we choose our partners to heal the wounds of our past. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, that alone is all I needed to hear to say, okay, there's an unconscious, subconscious reason why I'm attracted to you, because you represent the combination of things that I want to heal, and that will be brought out in my relationship. Okay. Yes. So now, obviously, everyone in the world is not conscious of that, right? Yes. There are people who live either repressed and depressed in relationship or unsatisfied in relationship. And there are people that are conscious about that. I think the majority of people are actually unconscious about that and not conscious about that. Yeah, so your first question, your first talking point here says, why do we fall in love? So why do we fall in love?
Well, the primary reason we fall in love is very unromantic. Although when we fall in love, we call it romantic. And it's romantic, meaning it has intense emotional feelings to it. Like you feel more alive than you've ever felt before, and you can't stop dancing or thinking or ruminating and dreaming. And all of that is very romantic. But what is actually going on underneath that is that in your unconscious mind, or at the level out of your awareness, you have met somebody who is a facsimile of, not identical, but a facsimile, a close enough picture, sort of like an impressionistic painting, of the major traits of your caretakers, whoever they were, mom and dad, so parents. But sometimes we use caretakers because sometimes children were reared by a sibling, or they were reared by, they were foster kids, but whoever was there. So we call them caretakers, and especially in the first 3 years of life. And also now, as some research has been done on this, they push back the primary memories to probably the first year of life. So it's really important what happens in the first year of life. But what actually happens psychologically is the baby is now interacting with caretakers, and the baby's brain is interested in only one thing, which is to survive. And if it can survive, then it's interested in play and in laughing and giggling and running around. But if it's scared, and so it goes back and forth between being scared and being fully alive. And those two things depend on how the caretakers interact with the baby. Now, the brain is recording everything. It's like a movie camera, records everything. And it records all those behaviors the parents did or did not do that contributed to the baby's certainty of survival. Like picking it up on time, feeding it when it's hungry, covering it when it's cold. But we thought for a long time it was pretty much those physical things. But what we've learned in the past, I think it's probably 15 years, especially by some research done in child psychiatry at Harvard by a man named Dr. Ed Tronig, that the primary thing the baby's interested in, and this is so revealing, is how the face of the caretaker looks. Whether the eyes are open and in a gaze rather than glaring, whether the cheekbones, whether the cheeks are dropped rather than tight, whether the lips are smiling rather than still. And and he did research on if the mother doesn't show any expression, and he calls it a still face, the baby goes into panic. It wants the mother to respond. Even though the mother's looking at the baby, if the mother doesn't respond to the baby, the face looks like a mass, the baby will go into panic. And as soon as the mother drops that and goes back into resonating, smiling, the baby comes out of the panic. So we've learned that it's the quality of the presence of the caretaker. So in the research we've done, and this also is amazingly complemented in relationships, when you're engaged emotionally, everything is great. If you turn away, then that triggers the survival response. If you turn back, or if you're looking without engagement, that triggers the survival response. The baby's filming all of this. So the primary thing that the baby gives energy to are the things the parent does that injures survival or doesn't do, which is needed for survival. And that's the most emotionally charged memory. So now you're grown up and you've got these memories that from childhood, and you're in your search and find mission in adult life. It actually starts with adolescence. Those first adolescent love affairs are attempts to find a person with whom what didn't happen in childhood, that ensured survival, can happen. So you look for that. So when you, in adulthood, fall in love, decide to engage, and you don't have to get married, but you could. That's why I think monogamy arose, because monogamy is sort of a promise that I'm going to be there. It is less about sex than it is about reliability and predictability and dependability. I know the argument is about sex and multiple sexual partners, but it has hardly anything to do with the reasons for monogamy. Monogamy is, can I count on you? So you find this person and they're across the crowded room and you feel them. You go across the crowded room, or you find your way to them, or you send somebody over there, or you do something to get this person into your life, because your unconscious mind says, this person is like my caretakers, including what my caretakers did not do for my survival. And they're most important to me because they're like the part of them that did not meet my needs. Now that I'm connected to them again, I'm going to get those needs met. Yippee! I got to get over there and get connected to you, because now you're going to give me the hugs you didn't give me, the presents you didn't give me, the warmth. You're going to be responsible and reliable and all the things that I didn't get, which I complain about all my partners. They don't do all that stuff, but now you're going to do all that stuff. So you fall in love because you've met somebody whom your unconscious says will give you all the needs you didn't get in childhood. And now you're going to survive. And the feeling of full aliveness you get is our nature. That's what we really are, creatures of aliveness. And when that's dimmed down by anxiety, we want it back. We want it back. And so this person's going to give that back. So it's an amazing experience to fall in love, because it has to do, A, with survival primarily, and then B, with the experience of who we really are, which we feel before before the light goes out again in the power struggle. So that's a sort of a long answer to the question, but.
Oh no, I love your long answers. Keep going, because I've talked about this. It's in your books, but it's coming from you, and that's what I want to share with people, because it's you. You've written the books. You've started the movement. You created Imago. So now, let's say people get into these relationships and they get married or they don't get married, but somewhere along the line, as you say. So let's talk about the next stage. You said it goes bad. So why does it go bad?
Well, it goes bad, and this is the almost tragic comedic part of falling in love. It goes bad because the person you fell in love with can no way in hell meet those needs, because when they were little, their caretakers trained them in such a way that the parts of themselves you need were sort of not developed in that person because of their relation with their caretakers. So you fell in love with them because they're similar to the people who didn't meet your needs, and therefore they have the same deficit that the caretakers had. So when you say, okay, you don't unconsciously, consciously you do not know what is going on in the unconscious. So now I'm in love with you and we're together, and now what about that thing that I didn't get in childhood? when are you going to hug me? Or when are you going to take initiative? Or when are you going to call me back on the phone? Or nowadays, answer my text as soon as I send it. We have a daughter that's not married. And she writes me every time her boyfriend, especially her new boyfriend, says, I wrote him a text and he didn't text back for 2 hours. Right back and said, maybe he was busy. And because when he wrote back in 2 hours, he was so excited to get your text. Yeah, but he waited 2 hours to respond. So apparently in her childhood, she didn't get an immediate response. I keep telling her, every time you tell me about this, I remember how bad my parenting was. She said, well, anyway, so we get into that. So these people, the person you fall in love with can't meet your needs as they are. Now, here's where the magic of a committed partnership, usually called marriage, but it can be in a committed partnership which you're not married, if certain things like marriage are part of that, like I'm going to hang out and we're going to work this through. So I have a need for, say, more physical contact. Didn't get enough. Or emotional intensity. Didn't get enough. So I'm going to say, when you tell me you love me, we just say it with a warm and kind and energetic voice. So I know that you're feeling the love you're telling me you feel. Or when you hug me, would you really hug me and don't just make it mechanical? Well, I'm probably touch phobic. And that's why I don't hug you tight. And I'm probably got my feelings are regulated and suppressed, because in childhood, that's how I had to survive. So I'm said, I'm just not a hugger. And I just don't do strong feelings. I gave you a card and I sent you a present. I took you to dinner and we went to Paris. But these, intense hugs and emotional expressiveness, I just don't do that. I'm a more logical, contained person. I go into all of my rationale to deal with my wounds in childhood, which was don't be expressive and don't touch, because touching was painful apparently for you as a baby. So here's the magic now. So let's say my partner wants emotional intensity when I talk to her, especially about her. If I will just practice doing that, and I'll say, okay, I usually don't push up, but I'm going to say, I really love you, and I really, really, really think you're beautiful, and I'm so glad we're out this evening to do that. If I will push through, I'm pushing through a defense against that which I developed in childhood, and eventually, and not too long if I'll do it regularly, I'll start feeling the intensity. It won't just be intensity. It will trigger a neurochemical in my brain called endorphins, and occasionally maybe a little dopamine. And I'll start feeling my words. They won't come from the left brain. They'll be coming through the right brain. They'll be supported by the neurochemistry that's produced by the words themselves. So guess what? By responding to my partner's need for emotional intensity, I get my feelings back that I had to shut down in childhood. So my partner's need calls me in and gives me an opportunity to evolve a part of me that I shut down. We call it, I recover my wholeness. So here's the thing that makes many people say that sucks, is my partner's deepest need is my greatest opportunity for growth and healing, myself. So I have to thank you that you need emotional intensity. Otherwise, I would have kept reins on my feelings all my life. So you call me into the undeveloped parts of myself. And, whether that's hugging, so I have to hug you and I have to get over my skin phobia and realize I can hug without being hurt. I can hurt without, being rejected, or whatever it was the caretakers did that made me not want to be touched. And a lot of people are like that. That it's just amazing how important it is that caretakers know something about what the human brain needs, which is it needs emotional presence, and it needs physical contact. Touch is very important to the baby's sense of survival. So that's why it goes bad, because the partner I married is the one who's least capable of giving me what I need. But the wonder, and I'm the same for that person. So it's always two ways. And some people say, well, they don't meet my needs. Well, you're probably not meeting theirs. And so that led to the impasse that both people have been defended in childhood, and their defenses now are colliding in adulthood. So what each has to do is stretch beyond the comfort zone into behaviors that they say, no way in hell, I don't do windows. They have to do windows. And when they do them, they learn to be window cleaners.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful experience because now you can see the world, all the mud's gone, and so forth. So I think that's why I keep in this work, is because that incompatibility. So what Helen and I now call it, and I wish she was here because she could add so many wonderful stories to this. We call it incompatibility is the grounds for a great relationship. And in fact, compatibility is the grounds for boredom. And if people marry the person they've fallen in love with, they will always marry an incompatible partner. And that's in the service of the mutual growth of both. So compatibility doesn't grow you because you have nothing to stretch into. There's not enough tension in the relationship. You need incompatibility for the tension for growth to happen.
So what about compatibility in terms of commonality? So I have sort of two situations. So let's say we have the husband and the wife who are incompatible, but I see here on the notes that there's a question that, can relationships work if only one person is willing to work on it? Before getting into Imago a little bit deeper, I took on the idea that you choose your partners to heal the wounds of your past, and I started working on my own wounds. And I believed and took responsibility for every possible thing I could do, from the way that I thought, from what I projected, from what I visualized, from how I reacted. And I went on a deep dive to kind of heal anything that would come up for me in my relationship. But that became an imbalance of, I was doing a lot of sort of self-growth and getting uncomfortable and reaching out of my comfort zone and healing anything within me that I could reach for through EMDR, through hypnosis, through just traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, through law of attraction. So we have that incompatibility, but then what if that person isn't interested in doing the work because their imago says that they chose, that the way they react when they don't get what they want is that they rebel and run away. So if they're not willing to not run away, what do you do then?
Well, if they're not willing to stay and work, what do you do? Well, there are, that's a very consistent question because everybody marries somebody. One of them is an approach person and the other one is an avoidant person. And that's a part of their incompatibility, is that a person with more emotional expressiveness, like Helen is she's a networker. She reaches out, and so she's always coming up with stuff. I'm an introvert. I shut my feelings down. I'm left brain, and so forth. So that will happen in most relationships. One person will be, and back when we were having trouble in our own marriage, now about 18 years ago, we were on the verge of divorce. But actually, it's been about 20 years now, on the verge of divorce because of the same pattern, and a few other things thrown in that both of us had because of the complexities of our childhood. So so that's going to be there, and that's what is important. Let me just go off side a minute. What is important and makes it work best is when both people say, we're going to be partners in the project. And I hate it, but I'm going to be a partner in this. So then you make a covenant that when I'm most uncomfortable with what you want, that's when I'm going to be there and produce. But if I don't have a covenant, then when I get uncomfortable, I'm going to go to my childhood defenses. So this is why we work to create conscious partnerships, that you're partners, damn it, not competitors in the relationship. But if one person won't show up, then what the other person can do, who is aware of the dynamics of a relationship, is that they can be different in the relationship. Like the initiator, who is always showing up with the introvert, can really understand that the introvert is not avoiding them. They are protecting themselves from the intensity of engagement because they unconsciously need that to survive. So you regulate how you show up. And one of the ways the initiators show up that messes it up is to say, why don't you, and let's go to a therapist, and why don't we plan more time together, and when are you going to stop watching TV or stop writing your book or stop working so late? Like, they guilt them to high heaven, thinking that that person is now going to say, oh, well, thank you for, wanting to be with me, and I'm going to shut down my computer and come home early, and we're going to have a wonderful time. They're not going to do that because they're not aware of what is going on in themselves when somebody invades their space or what they experience as invasion. So the more aware person has to know what the dynamics of relationships are. And if you don't follow them, you're going to just make matters worse. That's why we say to a partner who comes to a workshop without their partner is, we're sorry that your partner's not here. You cannot go home and teach your partner this workshop. You must go home and be with your partner what this workshop says you should be. And everybody's a minimizer and a maximizer. And if you're a maximizer, you're going to have to kind of contain your energy. If you're a minimizer, on the other side, you're going to have to rev up your energy. Like if you're a very active networking person is getting their needs met somewhere else, because you're not showing up, you're going to have to go and show up. So one person who's conscious of the dynamics can change the dynamics, but they can't change it by getting the partner to change.
Correct.
They can only change it by changing the relation partner. What that does is produce two possible outcomes. One we've discovered is that it will produce a negative outcome because the partner is experiencing a change in you, triggers their anxiety. They don't know what the hell's going on, so they get the hell out of there. And the second thing it can produce is curiosity. Like, what are you taking? What are you on? Did you go to a seminar? Gosh, you've been so kind and warm for the past week. And I've experienced you just kind of letting me have my space and not criticizing me for it. In fact, the other night you told me, why don't you go watch some TV and take some time to yourself? And this introvert is saying, wow, I can do this without guilt, and so forth. Or you can reverse it, whichever. It takes too long to go through the scenario of both sides. But the bottom line is, one person can make a dramatic difference, but you can't predict the outcome.
Right. Yes. No,
most of the time, the outcome will be positive because becoming a safe person for your partner makes them curious. But sometimes it triggers something deep in them, and they then have to get distance, even though you have not invaded their space. They just wonder what's going on with you. Are you having an affair or something like that because you're treating me so nice? Or what are you trying to make up for? Or they go into all of that.
Yeah.
But the other person just says, well, tell me what's going on. Or thank you very much. I'm glad we had this dinner and that we kind of didn't talk about our relationship for once. So we just talked about, going to Paris or something like that. Because usually the initiating person wants to talk about the relationship. Why aren't we doing so-and-so? Why don't we do more and more? And the other person don't want to talk about it at all because they feel so, engaged about that. So it's a good thing. But I'm spending a lot of time on this. I just want the listener to hear that you can make a difference, but you cannot do it by continuing to expect your partner to change and respond to your pleas. You have to be different so that they become that breaks the dynamic, of the impasse.
So I definitely had experienced that with some of the work that I had done to be different, and saw an energetic change of like, I'm calmer, therefore you're calmer. I'm not, in your face telling you or educating you or wanting to pull you. And there was, and that. And so I definitely also teach and tell people and show people that, there is so much power that you still have within a dynamic that you can work on, that most people don't work on. They just want to blame the other person for not being different.
Right.
But if you kind of take responsibility, even from just the way you think about them or the way that you feel about yourself or how you react to things. I noticed when I was defensive that I thought, oh, well, that's something in me. I have to, what's the ideal response here? The ideal response is that I don't get triggered, and that I feel safe, and that I feel calm, and I feel centered, and I feel love, and I don't need to defend myself. So let me go work on that. And so for this whole time, though, I've done a lot of the, like, I'll take the lessons and I'll go work on it myself. And what I didn't understand until I actually started doing the work with a therapist, doing the Imago work and reading the book, because I hadn't read the book at that point, because I had to, like, held on to your books, because I'm like, okay, I can't wait to do this work. I'm the student. I'm like, let's do this work. Let's do this work. I want to learn. I want to grow. But I also thought I had to do it with a partner. And so when I was starting to read it, and I realized, even just the first 20 pages of your book, talking about the fact that why Imago, I get the concept that you can't heal some of this stuff without being in relationship. Like, relationship becomes the place where you actually really do the deeper work. It's not about the separate. It's about what happens in that dynamic, because you are trying to heal possibly abandonment and not feeling safe and feeling secure and love and good enough. And so with about the, when someone decides to leave a relationship because that person doesn't want to do any more work or isn't interested, or just the divide is too big, and you move on to the next, because people get married multiple times, and I'm a big fan of, you haven't probably done enough work. I want people to take more responsibility and not just necessarily do the knee jerk of, you're not making me happy, because that's not the world I live in. We can make just like your therapist about your Hawaiian shirt, you can have Hawaii wherever you go. You can also be happy wherever you go. You can create in your mind, you can create in your energy field what it is you want to see and vibrate at that level. So for that reason, I've also encouraged people to don't blame other people. Don't be the victim of how, what that person's doing to you. Assess your own feelings and needs, and figure out how you can get your own needs met, and see what that's really about and what you're contributing to that situation. So now we have that someone decides to go off from a relationship and attracts another relationship that might be more compatible, but is there still another Imago layer of, again, that unconscious, subconscious, there's still something I want from you that I'm not getting? Because you mentioned that compatibility and incompatibility was almost like the grounds for a better relationship. So what about the people that are still in love, but more compatible? Mm-hmm. Isn't there still some kind of lesson that we're going to go through there?
If you're in love and compatible, well, actually you won't be compatible if you're in love.
Okay. All right. That's great. Good to know.
Because the dynamic of the selection process, unconscious dynamic, pairs you with a complementary person rather than a similar person. There's always enough similarity and compatibility. Like we can have a political conversation. I mean, there has to be a range of, I think value systems turn out to be one of the things that I can't marry, even though I'm in love with you, I can't marry you if our value systems, like if you want to kill people and I want to save them, that's pretty hard.
Yeah.
And if you want to sacrifice yourself, but I would like to make, $1 billion, that would be, those are some, but certain compatibilities, like we both want children and we both have a sense of care about the world, or we don't, we both just want to make money and then we'll give our money away or whatever. So a range of compatibilities so that you can actually live together. But the incompatibilities are usually those emotional things that have to do with need satisfactions, which are always connected to the brain's interest in survival. But there's also a complementarity that seems built into nature itself. And I've been really curious about that now for about 5 years. I don't know, every now and then my brain gets interested in, well, why is that? What is this complementarity about? So I began to read quantum mechanics and discovered that in the quantum mechanical world, there's a complementarity is the nature of nature, that a particle is a wave, which is a particle, and that they're complementary. The wave and the particle are two sides of the same thing. So nature is made up of polarities in tension. And the one polarity is different from the other pole. Particle is different from a wave, but they are two ends of a continuum called a wavicle. And when I got that clear in my mind, like I don't understand 90% of what I'm reading, but one day it dawned on me, Complementarity is in human beings what the waveable is at the quantum level. So this complementarity is not a psychological structure that just happens to be that, opposites attract. They do attract, but that's not a romantic or poetic or sentimental thing. That's the way nature is built, and couples inhabit nature. So there are two sides of an individual. Sometimes I'm focused like a particle, and sometimes I'm being creative and flowing like a wave. And but I'm more particle-like in my relation with Helen because I'm left brain. I focus on things and details and structure, and she's intuitive, creative, and focuses on flowing things and networking and stuff like that. So it got really clear to me that all the things that we have thought were psychological, that were kind of everywhere, are actually cosmological. They are the local manifestation of a cosmic process that's happening everywhere. So so partnership relationships, couples, are quantum phenomena. So therefore, that pull and push, the polarities, is not there for conflict, which is what human beings use it for. It's there for the tension of growth. Mm-hmm. So the two things in tension that growing produce a third reality, which is another level of themselves. So in that sense, you can always grow because the thing that produces polarization is difference. Mm-hmm. And you can, when you discover another difference, like the other day, Helen came up with something. It's like, where did that come from? We've been married for 37 years, and you want to do what? So I could stay with that and get mad about that, or criticize her for that, or just not participate in it. Or I could say, well, I'm curious about that, because the principle of managing a complementarity is mutual curiosity versus judgment. So instead of going into judgment, I go into curiosity. And now I discover what is going on with Helen about that and what would happen with that. And so that interests me. And so now I decide to use my own experimentation, because I do have that thing. That's how I developed Imago, is to experiment. So we'll go and try that and do that. And you find it's not like you made it up. The experience is not like the concept. And my concept was I would never want to do that. My experience was, this is kind of fun. It's more fun than I thought. So why don't we do more of that? And now I'm beginning to flow with Helen in a co-creating process instead of polarizing with Helen that produces a splitting process. So, but you have to know that the principle of curiosity should be what you bring to difference, rather than the principle of judgment and criticism. And if you don't know the difference between those two things, your brain always does not like novelty. It actually, most of the brain doesn't like novelty because the brain has a homeostatic state. And when it's surviving, even if it's not all that wonderful, it's surviving. And you bring novelty to it and says, if you did this, it would be better. The brain says, prove it to me. And so you have to use that thinking part, that observing part of your mind, noticing yourself, and say, well, I learned that curiosity can open a new experience. And so I'm going to go and do that. So we're going to hug longer, or we're going to go ballroom dancing, or something that's relational. And usually that's where the main growth part is, if it's something relational. I'm going to do that in order to experience something. Here's not a childhood wound here. This is just human. The brain is basically paranoid because the brain for millions of years wandered through the jungles, and if it was curious, it got eaten for lunch. So it had to be defensive and paranoid until it discovered it really wasn't a tiger. It was another human being, wanting to connect with them. So that has millions of years of evolutionary programming. So we're not going to just be excited about a new thing at the beginning, because it could, threaten the survival mechanism. But if you consciously can go curious, then you actually discover you can survive better with this new thing, and so forth. But that's intentionality. You really have to become intentional about that. Mm-hmm. And I remember that for the last 20 years, Helen and I have trained ourselves out of negativity into curiosity. It's a much better way to live.
So, well, and thank God that's my natural state. So, but I know there are a lot of people who it isn't.
Yes.
And that's seemingly an insurmountable hump to come over when there's people who aren't naturally inclined to do that. They have no model for that other than possibly you. But their default mechanisms are going to be survival and protection all the time. And they're not at that place where on a conscious level, they can say, oh, I see how that could be better. Let me try that. Let me fight through that impulse to protect and resist and just do what you said in terms of at the beginning of this interview, we're talking about like hug me more or be more, expressionistic with my words and more intention with my love and expression to you. Like someone who can see the difference that is, I have resistance, but I understand that I'm going to do that because I commit to doing that. There are too many people I think that just go, well, I don't feel that. I'm not doing that. And I'm not going to do it until I feel it.
Right. Oh, yes. I mean, that's a really defense. I don't feel it. I'm not going to do it. So what we have to say back is, and here's a piece that we've finally gotten clear. If you want to change, you have to do something other than what you think you normally would have to do to change. And one is understand your resistance. You can do that. You can understand it, analyze it, know where it came from, and all that. But self-knowledge is not change. Self-knowledge changes your knowledge about yourself. But change is when you behave differently.
Yes.
So we spent, as you know, are you a therapist by background? No. But you're so psychologically oriented that you know that that psychology, starting in the 18th century, and then when it split off from philosophy, split off to study the self. And then Freud came along and developed a psychotherapy because he got interested in the healing of the self. And where Freud went was inside the self. He constructed the first model of the interiority of human beings. It's really interesting that for thousands of years, nobody explored the inner world. They would read the poetry and the novels and the stories that were produced by creativity. But St. Augustine in the 4th century was the first autobiography of human beings. And there were no other autobiographies that were of significance until Freud started going inside and began to study dreams. And it was really important because dreams are about the farthest into the interior you can get. That's what happens in your brain while you're sleeping. You're not defended, and therefore all kinds of things shows up. So psychotherapy and all therapy was built on the model is that we have to go inside to subjectivity, and we have to explore, understand it, get insight into it, and so forth. And then we will change. But what us therapists discovered was you can have all the insight you want, and you will remain an educated neurotic.
Yes.
You'll still be neurotic, but now you know why.
Yep.
Before you were neurotic, but you didn't know why.
Yep.
So what we learned was something behaviorism taught. They went to the other end of the line and said there is no such thing as subjectivity. You just have to do your behavior. But they were wrong about that because you do have an inner world. I mean, it's self-evident. I stop and think, and I'm thinking. That's an inner world. But they were right about the fact that you have to do something. But theirs was all behavioral and did, reinforcement of positive things and positive reinforcement, all of that. And you'd have to pay attention to insight. And actually what you have to do, the best thing you have to do is both. You have to understand, but you do have to go to your partner and actually hug them until your anxiety is triggered, and keep hugging them until your anxiety relaxes. Because the brain is worried that if I touch you, I will be hurt. So I have to touch you long enough for me to not experience hurt, for my brain to say, I can hug without being killed. I can be touched without being hurt. In fact, it feels better So the brain takes in new data, but it never takes in an argument or a recommendation. You can't mark it to the brain.
Right.
You have to do something. Now, the brain, while doing it, develops a new neuron. And this is the thing that's been discussed, since the 2000. The brain actually changes with experience because it was actually created by experience. But up until 2000, everybody thought the brain was a fixed entity. Somehow it grew inside the brain, grew inside your skull, and it lived there in the black box, and you couldn't do anything about it. You just had to adapt to things, but you couldn't actually change the brain. Now we know you can. So when you do a new behavior long enough to go through the anxiety barrier, then the brain creates a new neuron that says hugging is better than not hugging. And so now you can hug without a resistance. Am I making sense?
Oh yeah, I know. Neural pathways. I totally understand. I'm glad you're explaining it. And, and it's interesting about this example that you're giving about hugging until you experience it's going through the pain to get to the other side of the pain to create that new neural pathway that the brain can say this is safe.
Got to do it.
And without knowing, I study psychology and human behavior, but I also, and astrology and everything, law of attraction and quantum physics. But before that, I remember a time with my grandmother where my grandfather had passed away and we were at the house, and their relationship was more dictatorship and sort of servant at that time. And so I wanted a piece of paper and a pen to write something down. I went to put my hand on a drawer to pull the drawer open, and she slapped my hand because it was messy. The drawer was messy. So she wouldn't let me open the drawer. And I didn't do it in the moment, but afterwards I thought what I really wanted to do was to pull the drawer out and dump it on the floor, to have her freak out and then calm down and realize it's just stuff. Like, it's not a big deal. I didn't do that and she would have had a heart attack, but that was my impulse to want to go through that sort of immersion therapy of like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? It's messy. What am I going to do? I'm going to make it messier. What's going to happen? You're not going to die. And everything's going to be fine, and we'll put it back together again. Yeah. So that was sort of one of my impulses to do that, but also the understanding that the new neural pathways. And for me, I harp on healing. Like, what is healing? Because while I am a big proponent of therapy, I'm not a proponent of all kinds of therapies and all kinds of therapists. Because what I find is, like you said, people get very educated about their issues, but they're not actually different. So to me, healing means you are different in the same situation. So you do what you need to do to stand in the same exact situation. You don't avoid situations. You don't try to avoid that person or that stimulus or that trigger or that trauma. You face it. And when you can face it and you are different, you are healed. And that is the goal, not to necessarily, be running away from people that upset you. It's to deal with, well, what goes on? What is that about? Let's get to the place where it doesn't matter. You don't have to try to control circumstances so that you feel comfortable.
Right. Yeah. So let me just add to this that, so our exploration and where things keep cropping up is what is healing and how does that happen? We serendipitously discovered the primary healing process in 1977, the year Helen and I met. And Helen, in fact, initiated it. We've always had a tense relationship. It's either been intensely horrible or intensely wonderful. And only in the past 15 or 18 years has it been, that polarity changed to it's great most of the time. And then when it's bad, it's not very bad. But in 1977, we were in her living room, and I don't think we'd even reached dating status, but it was more like we liked each other. We were curious. She was interested in what I was interested in cognitively, and I was interested in her and what she was doing. But we were polarized, and we're having this huge argument. In fact, sometimes we say, I don't know how we ever got married. we had knockdown, drag-out battles. Even the night before the wedding, we had one. I even considered not showing up at the wedding because that was so bad, and so forth. So it's a very intense story. But she said, in the middle of our fight, let's stop. Now, one of us talk, and the other one listen. And then take turns. And I thought, well, I'm in kindergarten, I've just been given a kindergarten instruction. But we did stop. It stopped me, and she stopped. And we just sat there quietly. And I'm aware that my intensity went down. And then we took turns and I listened to her. This was actually before I got mirroring down, but just listening without interruption. And she listened without interruption. And then I'm working with couples in the clinic. So I say, I think we've been working with couples, we've been engaged in these conversations about their problems and how they can solve them. But this talking like this, I don't do when in the clinic. So I went to the clinic and said to George, now you listen while Mary talks and don't interrupt her. And Mary, when she finishes, vice versa. And so Helen was actually the inventor of what we now call imago dialogue, because I started experimenting with that with couples. And then what I learned there, I would bring back to our relationship. And we would try it out and refine it a bit. And I would take it back to the clinic and do more with it. And what one couple was amazing, one couple crystallized all 3 steps of the dialogue process. And I'm going to get to my point in a minute. And that was, I got them to talk and not interrupt. And then I said to Mary, so what else do you need now? I mean, you talk without being interrupted. And she says, I need him to tell me back what I said. And he said, I said, well, George, would you do that? And he said, well, I wasn't listening too well. Could you say it again? So she said, well, yes, I can say it again. And I encouraged her not to get offended by that, just to say it again, and asked George if he would kind of turn off whatever's in his mind. And so the process was that she wanted to be mirrored. And so it was a smart guy and got it, and he mirrored her. And she broke into tears. She said, that's the first time in my life I've ever felt like anybody ever listened to me, ever. So this was her childhood wound. She couldn't get attention. So we kept working with both of them. Turns out he had never had it either, and he liked mirroring. And then I would ask him, well, what else now do you want? You got mirrored. And she said, well, I'd like him to tell me if I make sense. She wanted validation. And he said, well, I can't say that because you don't make sense. That's our problem. She says, well, you're telling me that I'm crazy. So what got clear to her was, she said, well, I don't want you to agree with me, because he thought if he said you make sense, blah, blah, blah. And she said, I just want you to see the sense I'm making to myself. He said, oh, okay. Well, I can see that you think that, and it makes sense that you would think that given X, Y, and Z. And she broke into tears again. Then we did it with him. I could see he was softening up and breaking into tears. And then finally we got to empathy. And she said, now I'd like you to tell me, how do you think I'm feeling in my world inside? And he said, well, I don't know. And she said, well, just make a guess. And he said, well, given what you said that I validated, I imagine you're feeling sad. And she said, exactly. So here's what we learned from this. When George and Mary learned to dialogue and taught me how to facilitate that with them. My brain is a constructive brain. I was aware I was learning something absolutely valuable because I saw changes going on in 15 or 20 minutes I had never seen before with a couple. And it had to do with the way they were talking. And so years and years of looking at that finally dawned on me, when people dialogue, their problems go away. Most of their problems have to do with the way they talk to each other, and the way they talk to each other is using negative energy, and blaming and shaming, and you don't, and you never have, and I was this and you didn't, and I cooked dinner and you didn't come home, and all of that. And finally got clear as I started reading in brain sciences, you criticize somebody, you trigger the cortisol in their brain, they then associate you with danger, and it's like, now there's no way in hell you're going to connect. So you have to change the neurochemistry of the brain. So couples have to learn how to say connecting things like, thank you for fixing dinner. And I'm really glad to be home in time. Glad I could get home. That'll produce endorphin. Now I have a sense of well-being that is triggered by the behavior. But the endorphin doesn't come inside the brain as a result of a thought. The endorphin comes because outside, which is where life is lived, I experience a safe transaction called a connecting behavior. So what we've learned is that if you come down to theory, that what happens with the dialogue process is it's structured so the brain knows what's going to come next. I'm going to talk, you're going to mirror. Instead of I'm going to talk and then you're going to criticize me and I don't know what you're going to say. So you have the structure of predictability. And then you do validation. I'm going to be seen and validated instead of negated. And empathy, which means I'm going to be connected. My emotions are going to be related to without saying, why you're so emotional. I'm just going to say, I can imagine you feel sad about that. What happens is the term we put to it is presence. When I'm fully present to you, then everything inside me goes into a safe mode. My autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic sides, go into balance. I don't have to escalate or de-escalate anymore because I'm not in a defensive mode. And a guy named Stephen Porges has worked about 30 years on this, and he says safety has to be located in the body, not just outside the body, but in the body. And when safety is located in the body, it's only located in the body if it's safe outside. He calls it social engagement. If I'm safe outside, then my body goes safe inside. Now I can thrive. But if I don't have that safety, I can only survive. And the difference between those two is categorical. One is the feeling of full aliveness, and the other one is the feeling of anxiety. And those two sensations constitute the two radical possibilities of human beings. And marriages that produce, in which couples are present to each other without judgment, both feel alive. Marriages where they're not present to each other because they're criticizing, both feel anxious, and then all their defenses come up, and now they have problems.
Right.
And they go to the therapist with the symptoms. We don't have sex anymore, or we don't listen to each other, or we don't seem to talk, and all kinds of problems. But if they get present to each other and have this technology by which they can do that over and over and over again, and if they rupture it, they can go back and do it. It's like if you hit the tennis ball wrong, you can practice it again. But if you want to play tennis, you're going to hit it wrong, but you have to recover and then practice the right swing until you get it down. And the same thing happens. So we have this thing called zero negativity as a pledge. And we used to have it only with couples. And as we've been working here in Dallas, we're aware that zero negativity needs to be in classrooms. It needs to be in corporations. It needs to be in churches. Gosh, there's so much negativity in congregations.
Totally. Fear-based shaming and...
Yeah, and you don't believe what I believe, and you see Jesus that way, but you know Jesus was the other way, and
yep.
You know it, and if you don't believe it my way, you're going to go to hell. All that sort of thing. That all of that produces negative energy, which means triggers the survival directive. Now I can only protect myself from you, but when I'm safe with you and don't have to think about survival, I can then flow with you, and then I think we're in the quantum field, where the energy is flowing back and forth between the polarities that are, out of which we arose out of the quantum field, and the energy flows back and forth. And it's a real field. It's not just an empty space between us. The space between us is filled with the energy from the quantum field. And when you put negative energy into that field, it exacerbates. And if you put positive energy, it does the same thing, but you get a different outcome. One is called cohesion, the other one's called chaos.
Well, I see that there's something coming out. I know you mentioned the book that's the 30 year of Getting the Love That You Want in January, I think, but do you have another book coming out called The Space Between?
Oh, it's out now.
It's out now.
Yeah, that's available on Amazon. And then next year we'll also come out with one that may not be of too much interest to your listeners, but it'll be the clinical professional textbook for therapists. So we're finally moving from a trade book into a professional clinical book.
Well, I might be interested in that. I would be interested in that. Harville, can I ask a somewhat personal question? It's not too personal. It's just
Sure.
really about your birthday. Would you be willing to share with me what your astrological sign is?
Well, I was born in September.
September.
And I think
What's your date? Your birthday? Not the year, just the day.
6.
Okay, you're a Virgo.
So I'm a Virgo.
And what's Helen?
And Helen is April the 28th.
She is a Taurus.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Yes.
Once we looked up in a astrology relationship book, what would those two signs, how would they react? And it exactly described us. They said that you drive your relationship into the ground by being incessantly critical of each other. That you don't. So that's very, very. When we read that, we said, "Oh, no wonder this life has been hard. We were created by the astrological signs to have this conflictual relationship." Then we said, "We're going to fix that."
Yep. Absolutely.
And basically, what we did was we moved negativity out. We took a deep dive. They call cold turkey. Said today we stop. And what we discovered is that was really hard. And as we researched what happens when you put a new program into the brain, in about 30 days, that new program ruptures the brain's homeostasis. And then the brain goes into chaos. Now you feel worse than you did before because the brain's survival with the other model, but you put in this new behavior called zero negativity, and the brain's been surviving because it was negative. You take that out, the brain now goes into chaos. So you have to keep going with the new behavior so the brain can discover, okay, we took out negativity, but we're not dead. And then it integrates negativity as a survival process. And you have to do it for about 90 days before the brain settles down with, okay, I don't have to be critical anymore. If I'm curious, I can be open to new information. If I'm critical, I'm saying the new information is too threatening. So change means you can't just do it once. Yes. You've got to do the same thing precisely over and over again for about 90 days.
Perfect.
You build that new neuron, and the brain says, this is even better than I had before. Exactly. Feels better.
Are you still doing workshops? Are you still seeing any, working with patients at all or doing workshops?
We don't do couples clinics, couples therapy anymore, but we do 6 workshops a year across the country. We go to Omega and twice, Propala twice. We are now going to Multiversity, and we go there twice a year, and we're going to start next year with Esalen.
Yay, you're coming to Esalen. Okay, great. When do you know when you have dates already for Esalen?
Oh, they are set, but I don't carry them in my mind. I know it's early in the year. I think it's sometime in January.
Okay, I will look it up. I have been
it's on our harvilleandhelen.com website.
Okay. So everyone listening, harvilleandhelen.com. I will do a little bit of an intro too, if you haven't already listened to this, and make sure everyone knows where to get all the information and to get Harville's new book and to connect with them. And then they will be back because we're going to do some promotion for the new 30th edition. Is that what it is? 30th?
Right. 30th anniversary.
30th anniversary of Getting the Love You Want, a guide for couples. And definitely the most powerful work I've ever come across. And I even think just individually, I think it's worth for everyone getting the workbook and doing the Creating Your Imago exercise and diving into some of those things that you may think, well, why am I doing this without a person? Because it could actually show you why you have certain relationships, just friends. I mean, it really just showed me what I looked for in certain friends and why those relationships didn't always work out, because I'm still searching for the same thing. It just isn't someone that I'm sleeping with or married to. It's someone that I consider a good friend or a confidant. And, yes. And it really just made sense of all that dynamic. So,
yes. Well, I think Keeping the Love You Find, we were asked to write that book for people who were looking for love. Getting was written for couples. Keeping the Love You Find it has in it, if you want to find the love of your life and keep them, you have to do this. And so in it is a proposal which we call utilitarian dating. And that is, you haven't found the love of your life yet, but there's somebody you like well enough to date. Use that relationship to learn all of the things you need for a relationship that would really work. And this is what I've said to my daughter who's looking is, every guy that you're with, it provides you with an opportunity to know how to be in relationship. And it's amazing she's done that. And every guy she brings home is better than the last one. But she's not quite there yet. she's now looking for the one that's, I think she's one guy away.
From the one. Well, I had some friends who got divorced a couple of years ago, and my plea to the wife as well as to the husband was, I'm not saying you need to stay together, but why not uncover? Why not do the imago therapy? Uncover why you attracted each other in the first place and start to work on that, because you're just going to attract the same person again if you don't clean that up. So it doesn't mean you have to stay together. Just go figure it out so you don't repeat the pattern.
That is the best advice you can give, because you don't change when you divorce. You just change partners.
Exactly.
You replay the same drama that you did before.
You take you with you. So if you aren't different when you take you with you, you will keep repeating the same thing over and over again. Lessons will be repeated until they're learned.
Yes, you are wherever you are.
Yes. Excellent. This has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that I can have you and Helen back on when we want to promote the next book coming out. And I definitely will send everyone, there'll be social media posts, and this is going to go on YouTube as well, as I'll extract the audio and put it on my podcast. And my listeners are very, very, they trust me a lot. They do all the things I tell them to. So if we want them to go buy the book, listen up, everybody. Get these books, get the workbook, do it yourself. If you're single, do it, because then you're going to understand a little bit more about what and Harville, would you say that someone who's single could do that, creating your imago exercise, and maybe start to reflect on the past relationships and on the friendships, and then start to, if they don't want to repeat that, do their own work? I mean, is there still, besides the imago work, let's say, there's still individual work to be done, isn't there?
No, there's individual work done, but it has a caveat to it, that it's not just mental work. You can behave differently in your friendships and with transient lovers. You can behave differently, but you can't just stay in your mind. Like many people, and I have no criticism of meditation and mindfulness, but if you say mindfulness is going to change your life, it's actually going to change your awareness of yourself. But you have to then move into an interactive space to actually change your brain. And so you can do all the mindfulness, and I recommend it, and then go do something, and that will change you. But if you just do mindfulness and think, that's going to change me, nope, you've got to move into the discomfort zone as in behaviorally. Yep. Then the change can occur. So it's the we call it the space between, is where life happens, and that creates the space within. And the space within is the house of memory and imagination. But the outside is the space of interaction that produces those internal memories. And what you want, and this to me was one of the great insights that I had one time with Helen, was I got to decide what kind of memories I want. And I can create them by my interactions with Helen. And if I want a memory of us yelling at each other, just yell at her. But if I want a memory of us connecting, then I have to prize her, praise her, connect with her, keep her safe so that she knows I'm an okay person to be around. And her brain is going to do all this stuff. Helen doesn't consciously say he's not a safe person. The brain says, last time you were with him, it was a bad experience. So she's going to experience herself cautious, or vice versa. So you have to have a history of predictable safety in the interactions. And that's why marriage takes it a long time and some knowledge to ever stabilize, so that you now would never leave it, because it took so much time to get that environment safe. And the other person will have to go through the same training process, because we don't naturally know. As human beings, we don't naturally know how to be safe. We just know that's our deepest desire, but we have no idea how to get there. And we usually think it's other people's fault. But right. We can create our own environment by what we put into it.
I use a very mind, body, soul integrated approach. I'm all about integration, because information without integration is pretty much useless. Like you said, that's what mindfulness is. If you're mindful of your bad behaviors or mindfulness of your triggers, we haven't changed the trigger. We haven't healed that. Right. So it's very, very important. So everyone make sure to go to Harville's website. I'll put all the links for everything you need to know, and check out all the books, buy all the books, do all the books, because it's really.
Would you become a publicist?
Can I become your publicist? You have no idea. I sent you a show that I already did. I wanted you to listen to it because I wanted you to understand how much I support imago therapy, how much I tell everybody, don't waste your time going to couples therapy. If it's not imago, don't do it, because because you have to take on that responsibility. Because to me, couples therapy, I mean, I work with people all the time, both on a physical level with training and exercise and nutrition, but also on a life coaching level, and even in relationships and with law of attraction and astrology. And at the end of the day, I see people wanting to go, I believe in the therapeutic process, but I don't believe in all therapies, because if you're going to entertain that I'm going to blame you for this and you're going to blame me for this, it's like all this top level conversation about this is not what's going on. We're not going to get anywhere if it's just a fight and a battle about what you didn't say or what you didn't do. If you can take responsibility for what you brought into this and what's being triggered within you, you start from a place of empowerment and not being a victim. And then there's some place to go with that. And for me, that's my whole brand, is empowerment and taking responsibility for literally everything you possibly can, even how someone responds to you, by the way that you use quantum physics and your visualization and your own expectation, that zero negativity of being in that positive place of, if you expect someone to show up negatively, they're going to. But if you can tap into the parts of them that you love and that you're projecting out that positive energy, you're more likely to get that than something else. So it's that integration. And I do really, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. So I'll be happy to keep spreading the word.
I'm your fan now with this interview. That you're amazing.
Well, thank you. And I'd love to promote people to come to the workshops as well. I'd like to commit, although I don't know the date yet, but I'll be at Esalen because I keep using the excuse that I'm looking for like either me teaching at Esalen, which is in process, or going to something that really, really, it would be a dream for me to come to a workshop with you personally.
Yeah.
Yes, I would love to do that. So hopefully everyone listening, you can join us at Esalen, hopefully in January of 2019, to do an imago workshop with the Harville Hendrix and Helen Hendrix.
Yes, Helen LaKelly Hunt.
Helen LaKelly Hunt. Sorry about that.
You didn't take my last name, so that was one of our big arguments for a long time. But then we discovered that was a cultural problem.
Isn't it though? Isn't it? I am glad you're mentioning that, because that was a problem in my relationship.
Well, a lot of psychology is actually stimulated by cultural value systems. But we don't know that. We just think, gosh, you're just having a problem. No, the value system of our culture says you should take your husband's last name. Well, but I'm a feminist, and feminists don't do that. Well, blah, 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 blah. But if you realize that was a cultural problem for women, that they were subservient to men for all the years of their lives up until 1920, hell yes, you should keep your own name. But that doesn't mean we can't have a relationship.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, and I think too, for me, it became a lineage issue. I come from my last name is Greek, Flazanes, and our Greek Flazanes family reunion, there's 3 of us left. And it's my brother, 4 of us, my mother, although she's not blood, but my father, my mother, my brother, and myself. And I don't have any kids. My brother's not married. And so at this point, it's like, after this, there's no more Flazanes. There's this sort of like, I love who I am. I love what it's brought to me, and I don't want to change it. It's my identity. I worked really hard at that and keep it. Right. And so I thank you for mentioning that at the end of the show. I'm definitely keeping that part.
You should get off your back, because we're in a different world where individuals, it's amazing paradox that we're going into, I think, and will be for the next 50 to 100 years, where difference will be valued and connection will be possible. But when difference is not valued, connection is impossible. So we have to do that. And one difference is we accept the individual is prized and honored for being an individual. And with that, they can then be in relationship because they're not being excluded or devalued. So it's kind of a paradox that the more you amplify the value of the local, the more it's possible for the local to connect globally. But if you devalue the local, then there's no connection global, and then you have chaos. And it's just logical that all of us are equal. We should accept our equality, and it should be reflected in all of our social and political and economic institutions. And in fact, when it's not, those institutions are pathological. Amen. So the big journey, the big job we've all got is to help institutions organize themselves in such a way they're compatible with nature. And nature, everything is equal in nature, including all human beings. So therefore, If you got a program, does it support human equality universally? Then I'll support it. If it doesn't, I'm not going to support it because that's sick. What's healthy is everybody's okay, no matter what you think. They are okay. Like Eric Burns said that long ago when he said, I'm okay, you're okay. But he was talking about psychology. But what we now know is that okayness is actually built into the fabric of nature itself, into the fabric of being. And it's our problem when we don't make the local, i.e. you or me or your gender or your race or your political or religious things, okay. It's our problem. That is, we are the pathological ones, not you.
Well, thank you for that. I'm sure people are going, amen on that. We're all equal. We're all good. We're all okay.
Yes.
That's makes, like you said, it makes logical sense.
Laws to support that.
Yeah. And it should be. Yeah.
Should be.
Well, thank you so much, sir. I look forward to connecting with you and your lovely wife in the near future to promote your book. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time out today for both me and my audience. And I will be meeting you sometime in the near future in person at a workshop.
Well, Helen sends her regrets that she couldn't come at the last minute and you all missed something wonderful. Maybe you'll get to see her next time.
I would love to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. JJ.
Bye-bye, Harville.